Well, welcome back to Exhaust Sports Auto. Well, I have a pretty special vehicle here next to me. I actually might be the very first person in the United States to do a review on the CX-5 Diesel, actually, the turbo diesel that is. And who do I have the pleasure of thanking for this very special opportunity? Well, none other than Capital Mazda of Cary. So huge shout out once again to those guys and Rodden for another amazing opportunity like this. I've actually been here multiple times before, and you've probably already seen some of those reviews. I pretty much did their entire fleet here. So, you know, every single Mazda in their lineup I've already pretty much done. And now I'm doing the diesel. So if you're interested in a brand new Mazda, definitely without a doubt hit them up, and I'm going to leave all of Rodden's information down in the description box below. And also I must mention I do have the CX-5 Turbo right here next to me, the gasoline turbo that is. And this is actually a press vehicle that I've had for the past week now to review. So if the review is not already up yet, then when it is, I will leave a link up to it up above. In this video, I'm pretty much going to compare these two vehicles. I have driven the non-turbo engine, and that's pretty cool too, but in this video, these two kind of in a similar price bracket. There's obviously $4 grand more. I'm gonna go through in this video just the driving differences between the two, just out on the road, how this feels compared to like the gasoline models like this. And I am going to do a separate in-depth review later on just with this vehicle on its own. But with that, let's get these bad boys out on the road, shall we? All right, well, setting off in the CX-5 Diesel for the very first time. It's my first impressions, if you will. I've been reading a few things, you know, didn't really watch any reviews. There's not really too many out there, but even if there was, I usually don't watch them. There is, you know, a lot of negativity towards this engine because people say it's not fast enough, it doesn't have as much torque as the CX-5 Turbo. And this 2.2 liter diesel turbo, the very first thing you're probably going to even notice about it is that it does not even feel like a diesel at all until you kind of like get into it a little bit. When you first start it up, yeah, there's a little bit of a rattle, I guess, but that's, you know, even today's like GDI engines make that kind of a rattle. So it's just like, it sounds almost like a gasoline engine from the outside. And I showed you the diesel exhaust clips as well. So, but this engine, this 2.2 liter diesel with 168 horsepower and 290 pounds-feet of torque, you know, honestly, I think those numbers aren't really that bad for a diesel, especially considering the fact that they did a lot of engineering to not make this like some BS diesel like what Volkswagen did. They honored every single like you know, safety and emissions and whatever to make this vehicle happen for the enthusiasts of Mazda and diesel. So even the MPG numbers that they've quoted, I'm sure this vehicle will probably even exceed that if a normal person is driving it. But now that we have this vehicle up to temp, let's put our foot into it. Honestly, it picks up and goes very similar to the regular turbo CX-5, honestly. And you know, I kind of had that sneaking suspicion. Never ever ever judge a vehicle by its spec sheet. You always 1000% need to go out and drive it for yourself, because I had a feeling I'd probably like this diesel, and so far I am. But the CX-5 Turbo, as healthy as it sounded on paper, it really wasn't that inspiring of an engine. Like, it really wasn't that fast. I love that motor in the Mazda 6 because it was a front-wheel drive only vehicle. I think with the all-wheel drive that comes with the CX-5 as standard with the turbos, this vehicle included, because this vehicle only comes in a signature turbo. all-wheel drive comes as standard, it kind of saps away a lot of the power due to the all-wheel drive system and the turbo engine, basically. So it doesn't really feel that fast. And plus, this is a pretty heavy vehicle, about 3,900 pounds. So that's another place that Mazda can probably improve, is, you know, lowering that weight a little bit. But honestly, when I tip into this, I get the exact same sensation as driving the CX-5 Turbo, the gasoline one. I will say the one difference is in this, I don't really hear that turbo like spooling up or that swooshing sound as much, but this engine is insanely smooth though. I mean, it's just like a gasoline engine. You wouldn't even be able to tell, honestly. Yeah, it sounds slightly different from a gasoline vehicle, but not that much. Yeah, it's totally a very refined experience, honestly. Like, nothing's like shaking or rattling inside. You don't really even feel that there's a diesel underneath there. Is this vehicle kind of justified in the fact that it costs like $4,000 more? Well, in all honesty, the way that I see this is Mazda is already a niche kind of a company. Like, it's very much like an enthusiast-driven company. So they're kind of making this to fulfill another niche within Mazda, and that is the diesel lovers, basically. Diesels are known for their longevity, basically. Like, people love diesels because you can keep them forever, basically. I wouldn't be surprised if this vehicle like runs like 500,000 miles, you know what I mean? Like, see how this bad boy handles on the turns here. Yeah, no, it handles identical to a CX-5, basically, which, you know, is obviously to be expected, of course. It might not have the exact same velocity as the turbo, but honestly, like, it's totally fine for this vehicle, really. No real issues with this vehicle in terms of speed and power. But yeah, like I was saying, I mean, Mazda is already like an enthusiast company, and the people who have their Mazdas, they like to keep them, honestly. Like, they like to keep them for a long time. So with the added longevity that this motor is going to offer, I think people are going to really love just keeping this for a long time, you know what I mean? So is that extra cost justified? If you look at it in that sense, yeah, it could be actually for that certain enthusiast market. But me personally, my most favorite engine in the CX-5 lineup is still probably the regular gasoline vehicle, just due to cost, basically. But if you're going to get a fully loaded model anyway, you know, for 42 Gs, I mean, it's something to consider, I guess, if you like diesels and you do a lot of highway driving, then this is going to be pretty good, because it pretty much feels like a gasoline engine anyway. And from here, you don't really hear the sound too much. I mean, at slow speeds, you might pick up on the fact that it's a diesel when you hear that unique sound, but for most people who probably get into this for the first time, they probably can't even tell the difference. But, you know, like, when I just give it subtle, like, just jabs of the throttle here, it picks up and moves extremely well. I will say, though, because of the signature model, it rides identical to the gasoline variant, because it's got the 19-inch wheels on it, which I'm not a huge fan of, because I said this multiple times, you know, they're the driver's car. So they put the 19-inch wheels and all that good stuff on it, so it's going to ride a little bit harsher. The main reason why I like the regular engine is because you can get like those optional 17-inch wheels, and it doesn't look like complete garbage either, so it's going to ride better, and it's going to be cheaper to buy, obviously. The only time where you'll kind of notice a lack in power is like just that initial pickup off the line, but after that it pulls extremely well, very similar to the CX-5 Turbo, honestly. So I really think a lot of people are going to like this vehicle, because, you know, and it's also still made to this fantastic 6-speed automatic, which I've said I've loved in pretty much every Mazda. It feels so natural. It's the right amount of gears, because it's a natural amount of gears. And another thing I'll mention is that there is no sport mode in here. They actually got rid of that. So that's something to note, I guess, but not like it really matters. I really don't care. And this vehicle does still actually have a 5,500 RPM red line. So this thing, you know, that's a pretty high revving diesel motor, actually. So that's pretty impressive on their part. And also with the diesel, this thing, you know, you have to fill it up with urea, basically, the AdBlue or whatever it's called, every about 9,000 to 10,000 miles. So about every like 2 oil changes that you do, you have to add that as well, and it's not really a huge deal really, but it's just something to note. And this vehicle does have basically an after treatment exhaust system. There was no way for them to avoid that because well, Volkswagen said that they did. They were able to pull it off, but they lied. Mazda actually did not lie. They actually just had to put it in, and it is what it is to follow the emissions. That's what they had to do. Does it really bother me? No, but the urea thing, that's the only thing you gotta you know, keep in mind as an extra little maintenance precaution. It's there to pretty much alleviate the nitrous oxide that forms due to the diesel nature of this vehicle. So basically it's like ammonia basically breaks down the nitrous oxide particles because it's basically carbon dioxide and water. So that's what that urea is essentially. With that pretty much covers my first impressions drive of the CX-5 Turbo. Very incognito diesel, if you will. Feels pretty much like a gasoline powered engine. I think if you can appreciate that, then you're gonna go after this model because it is very unique in that sense. And if you want to support basically Mazda's first diesel designed engine, well, there you go. That's another reason to maybe get this car because it is impressive. I'm very curious to see how far or where they're going to take this because you're going to see this in future models like this Mazda 6 and all that stuff, and they're only going to keep improving this engine from here on out. I'm very excited to see what they're going to do with it. They're probably going to make it even cleaner, even more powerful. Power already is not going to be something that you're going to have an issue with. It's really not that far off from the CX-5 gasoline turbo. So, if you want that extra, real world MPG, the longevity that this engine has to offer, then you might even choose this over the gasoline turbo. So if you're somebody who's driven both these vehicles, let me know in the comments. But now we are going to take the CX-5 Turbo out for a little spin. All right, well, now we are in the Mazda CX-5 Turbo gasoline version. You probably can't tell the difference, but you gotta just take my word for it. We are in that vehicle now, the gray car, the press car basically. So obviously I've been driving this car around. Obviously I know how it feels and everything, but for the sake of this video, I'm just gonna drive it again, on camera, that is. Because, it's always good to, drive cars back to back because it always kind of gives you a good perspective. So now that I just hopped out of the diesel CX-5 Signature, we're gonna see kind of how this compares. Yeah, obviously this is faster, but it's just how much of a margin does that matter for you? I'm not really here to just bash a certain engine or to tell you to go with either or engines. I mean, honestly, I love all 3 of these engines, to be honest. They're all fantastic engines. They crush it. I'm very happy that Mazda is giving you 3 excellent engine choices to choose from for this CX-5, and it's brilliant because it's their #1 selling vehicle. That dealership, Capital Mazda, they have like 1,000 of these things just laying around the lot because that's what they sell the most of, and now you have the most engines to choose from. Obviously, handling wise, it's going to be identical, of course, to the other Mazdas, the diesel, the regular gasoline. But where this thing really makes a difference is, yeah, the thrust is like a little bit more, but like not by a whole lot, honestly. Like when you're rolling and you stomp on the gas, that sensation is about the same, honestly, even in the diesel car. I think the main advantage that this vehicle has is like out of the dig, this is going to be faster. Actually, like many cars will be faster than diesels, out of the dig, because diesels do not perform well from like zero, from nothing. So once you're up and moving, though, you're really going to appreciate the diesel and this and pretty much all the engines. And but yeah, you get into the throttle. It's I like how this vehicle, it's got the sound. This is definitely the best sounding engine in terms of just the fact that you actually hear the turbo. The diesel, you don't really hear it that much, the turbo, like whooshing sound. I would have thought that would have been a great addition to that diesel. It would have been a great sound, actually, but whatever, it is what it is. The diesel has its own nice little rumble to it when it's kind of idling and when you're moving at slow speed, so I don't really mind it. It's a CX-5, and this is the 3rd time I'm reviewing this thing. I mean, visibility is the same. I mean, it's really easy to drive this thing. Same wheelbase and everything. It's actually 179 inches, not 177. But, it's a rather, it's on the smaller side as far as, crossovers go, and, it's totally fine. That's what gives it its amazing kind of nimble dynamics, if you will. Steering feel feels identical. Obviously, this vehicle does have a sport mode, which I really just don't like to use because it just kind of kicks up the RPMs, puts you in a lower gear, basically. I think the normal mode is aggressive and smart enough to kind of, you know, put you in the gear that you want to be in. Yeah, when you let off the gas and this thing makes a nice little whistling sound out of the turbo, which I really like. But again, I mean, the engine performance is what you're mostly here to care about with these vehicles. I mean, I like all three engines. I mean, I just like the naturally aspirated 4-cylinder because you could get the smaller wheels and it drives identical basically, and that engine is very much potent in itself. And you can also get all-wheel drive with that if you so choose, but you can get the front-wheel drive only also as an option. When you drive the naturally aspirated and the diesel back to back with this thing, you're gonna kind of realize like this isn't like a super like rocket ship like the Mazda 6 kind of is, because that vehicle it weighs less. This thing weighs like 3,900 pounds, so that's not helping the CX-5 really. And like I mentioned, the all-wheel drive system that comes as standard in both the turbo version of this and the diesel, you know, that kind of saps some of the power too. The naturally aspirated 4-cylinder has the option of just being front-wheel drive, so you can put the power down, and you shouldn't be lusting for power in any of these vehicles anyway, so there is that. Is the turbo gasoline the fastest motor? Yeah, it is, but it's just like, it's not like, you know, consider the other ones too, because they're also pretty peppy for what this vehicle is, and I think you'll be able to appreciate all of them. So that's kind of my verdict. I mean, you just got to personally try them all out. My opinion is not the end-all be-all, but the best part of the CX-5 as a whole, engines aside, they all have an expensive premium feel to it. I keep saying this, it's very Audi-like in its feel, even though it's a Japanese vehicle. It's got a nice, solid, like build quality, I guess, that you just have so much stability, even at high speeds in both either the diesel or this vehicle or any of the CX-5s. The stability is great at highway speeds, and that's something that you just have a lot of confidence driving this vehicle. So as a whole, that's fantastic. So with that, let's go ahead and let's kind of end this review off, at least this versus battle anyway. All right, well, now that we finished driving both of these bad boys back to back, what are my kind of conclusions, I guess? Well, let's start out with the diesel because that's the most important thing here. I think what you're probably going to notice is that you're really not even going to know that you're driving a diesel once you're on the move, basically. It feels and drives like a gasoline powered engine. I mean, it even has a pretty decent red line at 5,500 RPM. So, I mean, it's really not that far off. The only time you kind of, you know, notice you're driving a diesel is like at those slow speeds. You're kind of in traffic, kind of using the throttle a little bit to creep up. But honestly, I kind of like the noise. I'm not even gonna lie. I think it's a very unique sound, something you absolutely never get out of a gasoline engine. I mean, it has a really unique tone to it that I just personally really like. It's almost a kind of a melodic tone. Actually, even when it's idling a little bit, it almost, I know this is gonna sound crazy, but it even has like almost of like a V8 kind of idle to it. It's very hard for me to explain, but that's the best way I can do it. I really like how this thing sounds. I like how it performs. It's one of the smoothest diesel engines you're pretty much ever going to experience. So well done, Mazda. And I think the most important thing is, yes, when you actually punch the throttle, it actually does get up and move. The power figures of this, you know, ignore that piece of paper completely. I mean, it almost feels identical to this vehicle once you're on the move and you punch it. The only time that you're ever going to feel like a lag is kind of as soon as you punch the throttle and you're trying to, you know, make a left-hand turn or something like that. You're going to notice a slight delay, but once that's literally like a millisecond of delay. Afterwards, the turbo kicks in. I mean, it just starts moving extremely well. So nobody's gonna have issues with power with any of these engines. This one, the diesel, the non-turbo gasoline version, I liked all three of these engines. Mazda has just been killing the engine game, but this I feel almost is identical to this. Even though this is a signature with all-wheel drive as well, this is totally fine. It might be like a hair slower to this, and I've heard like the 0 to 60 times aren't that great with this, but honestly, if you get behind the wheel of this, you're really gonna like it. The smoothness, the refinement, the drivability, just the visibility, I guess, everything is identical, exactly the same as it is with this vehicle right here. All the Mazdas, they drive exactly the same. Reason why I like the standard non-turbo gasoline engines because you can get the 17-inch wheels. It rides a little bit better, but that's up to you. If you love Mazda and you love keeping your cars for a long time, I think this diesel might actually be an excellent choice for you because it's very unique and you're pretty much supporting Mazda in the sense that you buy these things, they're going to keep developing this engine and it's going to get even better and better. It's going to make more power, it's going to be even more fuel efficient. That's another thing. I think real world gas mileage is going to be excellent with this thing. Far better than what the piece of paper suggests. They're trying to underplay this because they don't want any smoke from nobody. They don't want anybody busting a Draco on them because you know, they lied or whatever like Volkswagen did. If you're in the market for your CX-5, drive all three of them, and if you have driven all three, definitely let me know in the comment section below. Like, am I out of my mind? Is the Turbo CX-5 gas the only engine for you? If you've driven the other two models, like in real world situations, you're pretty much going to have the exact same sentiments as me. I personally like this diesel. I actually might even choose this over this gasoline turbo, honestly, because I just like the way it sounds and it's just a unique vehicle. So with that, that's kind of my conclusions. Driving the two vehicles, pretty spectacular. I really appreciate Capital Mazda of Cary for letting me have this opportunity to review this vehicle, and I'm going to be doing a separate in-depth review, you know, as much as I can do it, because I've already reviewed this vehicle 3 times now. So I don't want to regurgitate anything. It's going to be a quick overview of the interior and the boot space as well. So with that, I'm going to leave all their information down in the description box below. A huge shout out to Rodden and the rest of the team here. Thank you all very much for watching. Take care and goodbye.